Good afternoon, everyone. Today's class, we are going to learn about the aristocracy and the new middle class. The aristocracy and the new middle class. See, socially and politically, a landed aristocracy was the dominant class on the continent, socially and politically. So, a landed aristocrat because they are landowners, they are having their own land. So, they were the dominant class of the society, especially even in the continent also. See, the members of this class were united by a common way of life that cut across regional divisions. That cut across regional divisions. See, these members they were actually united by a common way of life. So that cut across regional divisions. So whoever it may be, they are in a different places. So they came cut across regional divisions. They owned estates in the countryside and also town houses. So in the different part of the area, in a different region in the countryside, so they are having their estates and also they have their town houses also. And they spoke French language. The spoke French language, and even they were using this French language the purpose of diplomacy and in high society. Actually, the use of a French language, especially that shows that in a high position and as well as so to diplomat with others. So that is also so that's what they spoke French language. So dear students, these aristocratic people, so they were spoke French language, especially for purposes of diplomacy and in high society. They were using so how nowadays the use of English language it's became so the same way. So during that time, so the French language also. So their families were often connected by ties of marriage. So even those who are belongs to the different region also. So their families were often connected by ties of marriage. This powerful aristocracy was, however, so numerically a very small group. They are very less, a small group of the people, but the majority of the population was made up of the peasantry class. The peasantry class, that means the farmers. But the thing is that they are very so strong, they were economically very high, and even they were maintained the high five, and even they are landowners, and even so this the small group of the aristocrat they were dominant on the continent, and even they were dominant the rest of the people those who are in the society. See, to the west the bulk of the land was actually formed by tenants and small owners. To the west the bulk, I mean the bulk of the land, so that was formed by tenants and small owners. And in eastern and central Europe the pattern of landholding was characterized by vast estates which were cultivated by serfs. So this is what we need to be understood. So to the west the bulk of the land was cultivated by the small farmers, I mean the small landowners, and as well as the tenants. To the east and in the central Europe, So the pattern of land holding was characterized by vast estates, so which were cultivated by serfs. See, in Western and parts of Central Europe, the growth of industrial production and trade meant the growth of towns and the emergence of commercial classes whose existence was based on production for the market. So this is what the another development which we can observe in the western parts and the central Europe. So in the central and western Europe, what happened? So the growth of industrial production. So because of the growth of industrial production and trade. So here what happened? So the industrial production and even the trade, it was developed in the western and central Europe. So we know that actually the industrialization, it was started in England in the second half of the 18th century, and afterwards it was spread to the different parts of the European countries. See here, the industrialization when it was began in England in the second half of the 18th century, but in France and other parts of the German states, it occurred only during the 19th century. That means the industrial revolution, it was started first in Europe, it is in England during the second half of the 18th century. But in France and in Germany, so it was started in the 19th century. So in its works, the new because of this industrial revolution and the industrial setups and the production, the new social groups came into being a working class, especially production, and those were involved in the production activities. So, working class production and middle classes made of industrialized businessmen, professionals, so on and so forth. Are you getting now? So, because of industrial revolution, during 19th century, which was already taken place in the second half of the 18th century in England, but afterwards, so during 19th century, it's a little bit too late. So the industries were started in France and German also. So then after that, the new social groups were came into being working class population, and even the middle class made up of. So this middle class is there now. The new emerged social group during this century. So it's a consist of industrialists, businessmen, and professionals. See, in Central and Eastern Europe, these groups were smaller in number till the 19th century because those who are involved in the production activities or industrial activities, so those numbers were smaller. Those numbers very smaller. Okay, then it was among even the educated also and liberal middle classes, the ideas of national unity following the abolition of aristocratic privileges gained popularity. Aristocratic privileges gained popularity. In Central and Eastern Europe, these groups were smaller in number till late 19th century. And it was among the educated liberal middle classes that ideas of national unity following the abolition of aristocratic privileges gained popularity. Now, let us discuss about what did liberal nationalism stand for. So, the idea of the liberty or the liberal nationalism, so which was understood by the different class people in a different way. So, let us discuss about what did liberal nationalism stand for. See, the idea of national unity in early 19th century Europe, so were closely allied to the ideology of liberalism. Are you getting now? So the ideas of national unity in early 19th century Europe were closely allied to the ideology of liberalism. See, the term liberalism, it derives from the Latin root liber. So this liberalism actually is the Latin root derived from the Latin means oliver. See, what is the meaning of liber? That means free. Liber means free. Okay, see, for the new middle classes, liberalism stood for freedom for the individual and equality of all before the law. So once again, I would like to repeat. So please keep in your mind. So it is very much important concept. So the liberal is actually derived from the Latin word liber, that means free. Getting now? So for the new middle class, for the new middle classes, liberalism, it was stood for freedom for the individual and equality of all before the law. So this is what the middle classes people, so they were understood the idea of the liberalism or the concept of the liberalism. See, politically, it emphasized the concept of government by consent since the French Revolution. So liberalism had stood for the end of the autocracy and clerical privileges, a constitution and representative government through parliament. So this is what they were understood in a different way about the concept of liberalism. So, since the French Revolution, the liberalism, so it was understood for the end of the autocracy and clerical privileges, a constitution and a representative government through parliament they were expected. So, 19th century liberals also stressed the inviolability of private property. So, yet equality before the law did not necessarily stand for universal suffrage. That means suffrage means the right to vote. So, here, yet equality before the law did not necessarily stand for universal suffrage or right to vote. That means equality ಅಂದ ತಕ್ಷಣ all are equal before law ಅಂದ ತಕ್ಷಣ ಎಲ್ಲರಿಗೂ right to vote provide ಮಾಡಿದ್ರು. So you will recall that in revolutionary France, try to understand. So how it? So which marked the first political experiment in liberal democracy, the right to vote and to get elected was granted exclusively to property owning men. So only men. So already we learned this concept in the 9th standard first lesson. So those who are having property, so those were called active citizens. So to whom we used to call as the active citizens? Only the richer class of the society, especially those who are having their own property, especially men. So the women do not have right to vote. So that's what here equality before the law did not necessarily stand for universal suffrage, where all the men and women they are going to cost their own. So it is meant for only the men. See, here men without property and all women were excluded from political rights. So they were completely, those who are not having their own property and including women, so they were excluded from political rights. So they are completely denied political rights. So only for a brief period under the Jacobins did all adults males enjoy suffrage, I mean the right to vote, during the administration of Jacobin clubs. So however, the Napoleonic Code went back to limited suffrage and reduced women to the status of a minor. So after that, when the Civil Code of 1804 introduced by the Napoleon, so it was a bit reduced. Understood now? So code, the Napoleon Code went back to limited suffrage and reduced women to the status of a minor, subject to the authority of fathers and husbands. So actually even they used to believe like that, so the women are subject to the authority of fathers or husband. So throughout the 19th and the early 20th centuries, women and non-propertied men organized opposition movements demanding equal political rights. Are you getting now? So here, those who are not having their own property, so when it was taken place now throughout the 19th century and even early 20th century also, the women and also not proper tid. Not property means those who are not having their own property, the men also, they were organized opposition movements demanding for equal political rights. See, in the economic sphere, so it is about the political sphere. Okay, in the economic sphere, liberalism stood for the freedom of markets and the abolition of state imposed restrictions on the movement of goods and the capital. So like this they are understood. So the especially the traders and the those who are involved, the merchants and the business class people. So in the economic sphere, liberalism, it is very clear that it is stood for the freedom of markets and the abolition of state imposed restrictions on the movement of goods and capital. So whatever the state put the dues or customs or some of the taxes on the movement of the goods and capital, so that is what the abolition of that they are expected in the economic sphere. See, during the 19th century, this was a strong demand of the emerging middle classes. Let us take the example of the German speaking regions in the first half of the 19th century. So, Napoleon's administrative measures had created out of countless small principalities a confederation of 39 states. Confederation of 39 states. So, once again, please I would like to repeat and then please listen carefully. So, Napoleon's administrative measures had created out of countless small principalities a confederation of 39 states. Instead of countless small principalities, so a confederation of 39 states, and each of these possessed its own currency. So all these different 39 the states confederation. So here the each states they were possessed their own currency and even not only the currency and the weight and measurement also. See, if the merchant traveling in 1833 from Hamburg to the Nuremberg to sell his goods would have had to pass through 11 custom barriers and pay a customs duty of about 5% at each one of them. See, so in 1833, Hamburg to Nuremberg, if the trader or if the person, if you traveled with the goods to sell, so used to pass through 11 customs barriers. And also, if the person needs to be paid the 5% at each one of them as the customs duty. See, duties were often levied according to the weight of measurement of the goods. How they are going to collect now? So they are weighed. So based on the weight of the goods, they used to collect the 5% of the goods in the form of custom duties. Then the person needs to be crossed from to reach Hamburg to the Nuremberg means so he would have to pass through 11 customs barriers. Then you can just imagine 5 into 11 and what about the percentage? See, as each region had its own system of weights and measures. So somewhere different, somewhere even the weight also and even the measurement also. So this involved the time consuming calculation. So the measures of cloth, for example, was the L. That means which in each region stood for a different length. See, this is one example that is called L. This is actually the measurement of the cloth. Now what we are using the meter or centimeter and the same, so so which in each region stood for a different length. So here one means that's different, and in another one region the again that was different. See, it's the textile material brought in Frankfurt would get you 54.7 centimeter of cloth. So in Frankfurt, see the difference in Frankfurt, one means that is about 54.7 centimeter. So the same one element in males, it is about 55.1 centimeter. See, in males, the one pillar stands for 55.1 centimeter, and in Frankfurt, so it stands for 54.7 centimeter, and even in the Nuremberg, so it stands for 65.6. Nuremberg 65.6 centimeter, and in free bar 53.5 centimeter. See, dear students, in a different regions, in a different place, so the measurement of the cloth for one inlet, so it is so different. So of course there we can see one or 2 point similarities and all, but it shows that means so throughout the European countries, so they were used the different, even the same area also in a different area in a different region. So it's a stand for different measurements. See, such conditions were viewed as obstacles to economic exchange and growth by the new commercial classes, who argued for the creation of a unified economic territory, allowing the unhindered movement of goods, people, and capital. So, in 1834, a customs union that's called as a Jalaverin. So, Jalaverin, that means a customs union, which was established in 1834. It was formed the initiative of Prussia and joined by most of the German states. Okay, see, the union abolished the tariff barriers and reduced the number of currencies from over 30 to only two. 32 only two. So the creation of a network of railways further stimulated mobility and harnessing economic interests to national unification. A wave of economic nationalism strengthened the wider nationalist sentiments growing at the time. So, in this way, actually, so the different way the idea of liberalism stood in a political way and even in the economic sphere. Okay, so I hope you all of you understood this concept. And the next class we are going to discuss about a new conservation after 1850. Okay, thank you. Have a nice day.